Human action that leads to freedom. So this is something that I read from the introduction to the lecture or the reading of Hegel by Kojève. My name is Wani. I'm a philosophy student at La Sorbonne. And today I'll be reading you something from page 178 on the human action, the difference between the master's action and that of the slave that leads to freedom. Yes. So let us begin. L'action humaine du maître se réduit au risque de sa vie. The human action of the master is reduced to the risking of his life. So we will just see like how far can we distinguish ourselves from animals, and that is basically like how human our action is, or how we continuously transcend ourselves. So again, the master, all he can do is risk his life, and the reason why risking your life is actually a form of transcendence from being just animalistic is because animals just want to conserve their life, essentially. Or, le risque de la vie est partout et toujours le même. But to risk one's life is everywhere and always the same. C'est le fait du risque qui compte. It's the fact that you take the risk that counts. Et peu importe que ce soit une hache en pierre ou une mitrailleuse que soit en joue. And it doesn't matter whether it is from an axe, hash. Yeah, I think hash is axe, right? Yeah, axe. Okay. Whether it be an axe or a machine gun that is in play. Aussi, ce n'est pas la lutte en tant que telle le risque de la vie, mais le travail qui produit en joue une mitrailleuse et non plus une hache. So it's not lutte, struggle, or Kampf that produces the machine gun, but it is le travail. It is work, it is Arbeit that makes the machine gun and no longer the axe. So we see here progress. So the idea is like, killing someone or being afraid of things or risking your life in front of an axe, a rock, or a machine gun. But the thing that leads to this change and progression of this murderous object is work. It's just to show that Kampf, which is the action of the master, there's no progress. It's always the same thing. You're just risking your life over and over again, but it is work that shows progression and change. L'attitude purement guerrière du maître ne varie pas au cours des siècles. The attitude purely fighter warrior of the master does not change or vary throughout the centuries. Et ce n'est donc pas elle qui peut engendrer un changement historique. And therefore, it is not the action of the master that could engender historical change. And again, like as I mentioned in my other video on Kojève, on human desire, what is historic is something that has progress, and progress is made through change. Sans le travail de l'esclave, without the work of the slave, la première lutte se reproduirait indéfiniment, rien ne changerait en elle, elle ne changerait rien dans le maître, rien ne changerait donc dans l'homme, pas l'homme pour l'homme. So without the work of the slave, this struggle will continually reproduce itself indefinitely. Nothing changes in it, and nothing changes in the master, and therefore nothing changes in the man, by man, for man. In my first video, I talk a bit about this, which is what Marx says in Capital, the idea that if you have this goal in mind of this work that you want to create, it actually transforms or changes your interior world. So because you have this goal for this work, it in the end actually affects how it is that you structure your mind, because your mind is structured to try to achieve this goal, to produce this object, and this is how the object actually produces a change in you. So that is like something that I'm learning that's really cool about understanding Hegel's transcendental philosophy, at least like, from how I understand it, in terms of kind of like how the subjective structure is affected by objectivity, and not only when we transform the outside that we're transforming reality, but that reality itself transforms or has an implicit interplay with our subjective structure. So in this way, because the master's action does not change over time, does not create change in reality, does not transform reality, the master themselves in the end also has no change. So there's no transcendence or there's no evolution, and that's how we get to what Kojève calls une impasse existentielle. The fact that you can't actually elevate yourself from where you're at, the fact that you are actually at this point of l'ennui, boredom, and non-change. Le monde resterait identique à lui-même, il serait nature et non monde historique humain. The world stays identical to itself. It would be nature, not a human historical world. As I mentioned in the first video, but just to briefly go through this is how Arbeit gives the slave its content and its affirmation in the world as this historical human world, which is the world of technique, in opposition to the natural world, where it is something that just continues on regardless It continues on in terms of biology. It has its cycle, but it has no progression. And this is the difference between history and biological life. Continuing on. Tout autre est la situation créée par le travail. This is completely different from the situation created by work. Le travail Arbeit. L'homme qui travaille transforme la nature donnée. Man that works transforms the given nature. S'il répète son acte, il le répète donc dans d'autres conditions et son acte sera ainsi lui-même autre. If he repeats this action, he repeats it in different conditions, and this act would be itself different. Here we start to see the inessential accidental nature of given conditions. There's a really good example in the notes, so let me just continue. Après avoir fabriqué la première hache, l'homme pourra s'en servir pour fabriquer une deuxième qui par cela même sera autre meilleure. So having fabricated the first axe, man will be able to use it to fabricate a second. And through this, it would be other, better. So here we see progression, here we see education, here we see the acquisition of knowledge, savoir, and here we see how it is used and implicated as technique or teckné. When you meet people who are masters at what they do, when they just do something over and over and over again, Bergson has this thing in this book that I read, which is Matière et Mémoire, this one, about repetition, which is extremely beautiful, and maybe I'll share it somewhere at some point. But it's the idea that when you keep doing something over and over again, your body learns. Your body starts to take notice of things that it didn't recognize before. And when you keep doing something over and over again, you start to discover the internal structure of something. The idea is that how repetition and work is what it is that makes things better. It's the thing that shows progression. It's the thing that shows cultivation. And eventually at some point you realize that because the work that you create is a work of cultivation, you not only create a work that has a certain kind of value, that is autonomous, that is respectable, but you yourself, to make this work, have cultivated yourself, and that is how you actually elevate your own status as well. This is how you see a different relationship. The master never progresses because whatever he does is just risk his life. There's one action that never changes over the centuries, whereas like you see with work, you cultivate something new through repetition, through learning, through technique, and by that you create an object worth of value in acquiring knowledge to create this work of value that has progressed over time. You yourself have cultivated yourself and progressed over time. La production transforme les moyens de production. La modification des moyens simplifie la production, etc. The production transforms the ways of production, and a modification of the ways simplify this production. So you see that the action that is work which produces transforms the ways of production, and you see that how this change, this modification of ways simplifies the production, which is the work. So it shows production in terms of the person who creates the work transforms the way something is made. The change in the way something is made transforms the person who does the action of production. Là où il y a travail, here where there is work, il y a donc nécessairement changement, progrès, évolution historique. Here where there is work, it is therefore necessary that there is change, progress, and historical evolution. We already talked about this. There's this really nice footnote at the bottom, which is l'objet fabriqué incarne une idée, projet, qui est indépendante du hic et nunc matériel. C'est pourquoi ces objets s'échangent. Fabricated object incarnates an idea or a project, which is independent from the hic et nunc matériel. Hic et nunc is the here and now, the material here and now. So immediacy, accidental, contingency. This is why the object exchanges itself or is interchangeable. So to go back to Bergson, as you find the interior structure, which is the idea or the project, that is the essence of the object. Or if you want to say cause finale in terms of Aristotle, final cause, the thing that is the reason for being of the object, which is separated and independent from the here and now material, which you can say is the cause matérielle, the material cause, the thing that's necessary for this existence of this object. There's four, we're only talking about two of them, but it's basically saying that you can actually separate the essential element of this object from its inessential, this accidental, its materiality. An example that my professor gave for one of my classes on aesthetics, which is transsubstantiation. Yeah, I think it's transsubstantialism. I'll write it down somewhere in English. But it's the idea that with Jesus and his body and his blood, so the essence remains the same, but the blood as a material object and the wine as a material object are accidental. The same with the body and the bread. The body of Christ that you consume in terms of bread, the body itself, his flesh, and the bread as bread, it's material accidental. It's not important, it's inessential, but what is important is what it means. Then you go into all these signifiers, but I hope this other paradigm makes it a lot clearer instead of just rocks and machine guns. So the last passage, which is évolution historique. Car ce qui change en fonction du travail, ce n'est pas seulement le monde naturel, c'est encore et même surtout l'homme lui-même. We talked about this. Historical evolution, because what changes in function of work is not only the natural world and also but especially man himself. L'homme au prime d'abord dépend des conditions données naturelles de son existence. Man, above all else, whatever comes first, depends on his given conditions, natural of his existence. Certes, il peut s'élever au-dessus de ces conditions par le risque de sa vie dans lutte de prestige. Certainly, he can elevate himself above these conditions by risking his life in the fight or struggle for prestige. So this is how the master gets his value in society, but it's only a social value, an abstract value. I'm not going to say much more about this because I'm not 100% sure, but that is what is mentioned in class. Man is elevated because, as we mentioned from the beginning, he's no longer just there to conserve his life. He's like, I am not an animal, I can choose not to live, I risk my life, therefore I'm elevating myself. Mais dans ces risques, il nie en quelque sorte l'ensemble de ces conditions qui sont toujours les mêmes. But in this risk, he negates in a certain way the whole of his conditions, which is always the same. Il les nie en bloc, sans les modifier, et cette négation est toujours la même. He denies them, he negates them in a block, without any change, and this negation is always the same. Aussi, la liberté qu'il crée dans cet acte de négation ne dépend pas des formes particulières du donné. And also this freedom that the master creates through this act of negation does not depend on the particular forms of what is given, of the given. Here it's interesting because we talk about all or nothing, right? And if you know a bit about the Hegel's dialectics, you have to start with the empiric. When we say negation, or when the word negation is said like Aufhebung or Aufgehoben, what is important for us to remember, according to Žižek, or what I understand from Žižek, is that it is a relational negation. A relational negation means that we still need to have the first to get the second. It's not a negation where you negate it and then you just start completely from scratch. It is something that you need to start from and become something else. So when you totally get rid of everything as a whole, there's no way for you to actually go above something. There's no like step. So you imagine like, there's stairs, right? If you get rid of the entire stairs itself, there is no progress. So when you negate your first step, it means that you passed it, but then you needed the first step to get there. So then it still has to, in a way, like exist or be acknowledged in some way for you to have progress. So the point that's interesting here is that like you have to negate something, but this negation is actually an elevation from something else. The way that you come back as self-referential, the idea of Selbstbewusstsein, the idea of self-consciousness, it means that you have to come back to consciousness. You have to come back to something else. You have to change from something else, and you can't just get rid of everything. And you need to take into account where you started from, your given conditions, transform them, change them, and that's how you modify yourself, and that's how you elevate yourself to become something else. If you just totally always go like, I want all or nothing, there's no development because there's no appui, there's no support to actually get you to this other point. I think I made my point. Ce n'est que en s'élevant au-dessus des conditions données par la négation s'opérant dans et par le travail que l'homme reste en contact avec le concret qui diffère selon l'espace et le temps. It is only in raising oneself above these given conditions through the negation that is operated by Arbeit, work, travail, that man rests in contact with the concrete, which differs according to space and time. So again, the concrete as in like materiality, reality, that differs according to time and space. So back again to Hic and Nunc, which is in the end, the thing you can't escape is that we all have given conditions, but the ones that are given to us based on a certain time or a certain space, that is accidental. C'est pourquoi il change lui-même en transformant le monde. It is why he changes himself in transforming the world. I hope this was helpful, and I hope this makes you want to work, 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 work. But I think there's a lot more to be said about the specificities of what these things implicate. But I thought it was interesting, and I hope you found it helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.